This episode of the CinePunked podcast comes with a content warning for sensitive material around mental health, self-harm and suicide. Listener discretion is strongly recommended. This is CinePunked. This episode, Where They Can't Find Us. Hello, I'm Robert J. E. Simpson. This episode of CinePunked was recorded in September 2019 at the Crescent Arts Centre Belfast and is an unedited recording of one of our live panel discussions. Before you listen though, a little bit of context. The session was originally planned as a live panel to follow a screening of Eric Steele's powerful 2006 documentary The Bridge, which told the story of a year in the life of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge and the people who chose to end their lives at the spot. The film follows the stories of a number of the people who committed suicide through the eyes of those who survived them and one survivor too. The film stirred up a great deal of debate at the time of its release and remains controversial. At CinePunked, we believe strongly in discussing issues around mental health. It is something that we have all personal experience of, and we rather hoped that the film itself would help stimulate some conversation around an incredibly difficult topic and aid the breaking down of the taboo. We arranged for a number of mental health workers and therapists to join us, as we have done with other sensitive discussions, so that anybody in the room who was affected by what they saw or the conversation itself would have support on hand. We are joined in this by Stuart, who works for one of the rescue services here in Northern Ireland, to share his first-hand experiences. The conversation uses the film The Bridge as a starting point only for a discussion around issues of mental health and suicide. It is deeply personal and frank. Our audience on the evening, for various reasons, ended up being composed of the people we had working on the show, and being among friends may have permitted us to be a little more honest than we would have otherwise have been. A technical note to listeners too, there is some interference on one of the microphones that we have been unable to eliminate, which runs throughout the episode. We hope it doesn't mar your listening experience too much. So we are CinePunked. My name is Robert Simpson and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Rachael Kelly.
Hello.
And tonight, just for a change, we have a special guest, Stuart McChesney, who is a volunteer with the Northern Ireland Community Rescue Service.
Oh yeah.
Nice to have you, Stuart.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this, we've just sat down through a screening of Eric Steele's documentary, The Bridge, which was shot in 2004. During that, they kind of did it quite discreetly, and they filmed ultimately 23 of the known suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, which is quite an achievement in itself as a documentary. I think the first place to start with this conversation is kind of your reactions to the film. Stuart, you're new for our listeners. How do you find that film?
It's never. I have seen it before, but it's never an easy watch. That one. It's just the main thing that comes into your head is just why.
Why do it?
Why do it? I mean, it's a very easy question to ask that as well, because no one knows, and whenever someone's in what we perceive to be an irrational state, we can't empathize with them. We need to. So I think overall, disappointment is a sort of overriding emotion that I would feel, just a real sort of heaviness after watching that.
Rachel?
Well, I have seen all but the first 10 minutes of it before. I happened to channel surfing during a period of deep clinical depression, unable to sleep. I was channel surfing at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I happened across this film, and goodness knows what about that particular state of mind. This film really appealed to me. I ended up watching it all the way through, and it prompted me to look for help afterwards, which was quite a turning point in that particular episode. Watching it again this evening, it's quite a different experience. I'm able to watch it in a much more dispassionate manner. It's still profoundly emotionally affecting. It's a very difficult film to watch. I think it's an incredible achievement. as a piece of filmmaking. I have no end of respect for the loved ones left behind who contributed to it. I mean, if this is being shot soon after bereavement by suicide, which I've never been bereaved by suicide, thankfully. I can't imagine there is a worse way to lose somebody you love. And they were able to speak on camera about it and contribute to something that documents something that just needs to be discussed. It needs to be talked about. We need to lift the taboo about talking about suicide and about the crisis that leads to suicide. And I understand the criticisms leveled against this film. I have a certain sympathy for some of them, but I think it's an incredibly important and an incredibly profound piece of filmmaking.
Yeah. So I realise every time I talk about this, I find tonight's watching it quite easy, and now we're starting to talk about it. That's where my emotions are starting to come back in again. I first saw this mid-2000s, must be in Channel 4, screened it with my partner at the time. I remember being haunting and kind of sticking, and then I had put it in that nice safe little box where you don't remember it for 13 years until I was walking on the Golden Gate Bridge, and then it all just came right back to me. And I think it was the added poignancy of sort of being in the space and looking over that edge. I mean, it's over 200 feet from that tiny 4-foot tall wall down to the water. And for those of you in Northern Ireland, to put it into perspective, that's like jumping off the top of Simpson and Goliath down into the water. So seeing that and picturing yourself in that situation and thinking how easy it would be just to climb over that and look at that tiny ledge and then that big drop down is terrifying. But I've sort of already said this elsewhere and earlier on this evening. It's having lost 2 people in the course of a year to suicide, and one of them being one of my best friends. And in that moment, kind of trying to process it and thinking about what he went through and all the emotions. And for me, this film has been part of my catharsis and my kind of processing. Coming back to it when I was feeling very vulnerable, very, very low, but not able fully to talk about some of the stuff. And you see there are other people who feel exactly the same way. The guilt in particular is devastating, and trying to rationalize things with yourself. And this film allows people to have that voice and to say it. I love that mother and daughter early on, and the brother who's kind of off somewhere else thinking his own things, trying to rationalize it, and mother's talking away, and you can see the daughter kind of with the eyebrows constantly raised and kind of, she's thinking something completely different and processing it, and everyone's trying to find their way through and sort of to make it understandable.
Yeah.
I would think what's nice about that, well, nice in a sort of loose sense of the word about that film, is you see they're talking and they've got different perspectives on their reaction to their loved one committing suicide. And they're communicating maybe on 2 different levels, but they're communicating on the same objective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's something that is missing drastically within the gap between realizing that there's a mental health issue and someone going and committing suicide is huge.
Yeah.
In this country, I can speak, firsthand, it's a massive gap. And there's no communication between that, regardless of your point of view, whether you agree with one or you disagree with others. There's just no communication from, oh yeah, he's got a mental health problem. Oh well, he killed himself. Do you know what I mean? It's just a massive, massive chasm in between the two.
Well, where you come into this, so jumping outside the film a little bit, so you're someone who works for the Community Rescue Service. You're one of those people who gets the call to say that somebody is missing.
Yeah, well, we work predominantly for the PSNI. Whenever someone goes from medium to high risk, we would get called, and the majority of times it's not for the dementia patients, it's not for the special needs people, it's for people who have indicated that are going to go and end their lives. So our primary, as the name says, we search and rescue. And a lot of the times it is a positive outcome where we do find people, but more often than not, it's not. And one of the biggest eye-openers I've had is the age range that we would get calls to. I mean, to give you a contrast, is we've had calls for 12-year-old girls on a supposed suicide pact, which ended good if we found them, to 71-year-old, person who you think, oh sure, they've lived their life, they're 71, this grand, they'll be grand, and that's an unsuccessful sort of tasking, if you like. So one of the big eye openers for me doing this has been the range, and no one is immune. Absolutely no one is immune, but yet no one really talks about it.
I had an incident earlier on in the summer where I spotted someone who I think was, I'm still convinced, I think the Harbour Police were also still convinced was very, very high risk, and sort of displaying behaviour like the guys on the bridge, sort of up and down, hanging around somewhere for more than was really comfortable. It's the point where you know that this is just odd. And it was okay. I mean, it got dealt with, I guess, as well as it can be, and the outcome of their story I will never know, because they returned. But that's only a little bit that I know. But I had a thing a few weeks later where the Harbour Police came out to speak to me because I was too close to the river, which was ironic because I was just having my lunch.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've spoiled every walk I go on near a river or a bridge, because anyone else walking on that bridge is like, "What are you doing? I'm watching you." You know what I mean? So make everyone else paranoid wrecks as well, regardless of their intentions.
That's not a bad thing, though, is it? I mean, at least it's kind of an awareness that,
Well, what it does show, I mean, Northern Ireland, everyone says Northern Ireland's a very warm place. People want to help. People are very chatty, and they are to an extent, but we're also oblivious to what's going on. We're in a day and age now where we are fantastically connected to everything, but we don't communicate and we don't talk about anything at all. We've got Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it, all these outlets for communicating, and we're very good at hitting a wee like button or a wee heart button on Instagram and saying like, but we're crap at going round to your neighbour's house and going, I've noticed you haven't been out. You all right? We're absolutely useless at doing that. So it's kind of a paradox going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the social media thing is a really good kind of marker of how disconnected we are becoming. I mean, not only are we sort of substituting that online connection for real physical connection, that online connection isn't even based in anything substantial. You're putting a version of your life out there, which is it's a curated version of your life, which doesn't necessarily bear any great resemblance to what the life actually looks like. So a person sort of in crisis scrolling through something like that is going to look at everybody else is happier than me, and without the ability to kind of back that up with physical fact, because we don't go around and knock on somebody's door and go, are you okay? There's no way of kind of sort of recalibrating that to actually the day I posted that picture of me and my family out having a great time, we'd already had 5 fights in the car. The kid had wrecked his nappy all the way through. I was cleaning baby poo out of the seat. The dog ran off and rolled in something. It was the worst day. Then it poured with rain. But yeah, look at us. We're so happy and delighted. And that all you see is that we're happy and delighted. And you go, well, my life doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I sort of accustomed to it. I call it the church welcome. Hi, how are you doing? You all right? No, I'm crap, thanks. Oh, anyway, there's your seat over there. I'm a sort of panic whenever anybody says, no, actually, I'm feeling a bit shit today, or
you're
whatever.
Sort of like, that's not part of the social contract.
Exactly.
You don't reply, I'm terrible.
That's not normal.
No.
We're not kind of built in with any kind of way to process that properly. And, most of us work in jobs where we don't have the time to be able to take ourselves out of that job to say, do you know what, you need 5 minutes? Let's have those 5 minutes and have a conversation, because I think it will make a difference for your day. That's
one of my biggest bugbears. And I'm a victim of my own curse on that, is not having the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Have you ever felt guilty for sitting doing nothing? I know I do. I get a rare day off, and I'm like, oh crap, I can't be doing. I'm watching TV. Oh no, I need to do. And it really works me up. And it's just this lifestyle that you can't sit and do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't sit and do nothing. I would have to be up cleaning something or doing work.
Yeah.
And I have a 2-year-old child, so sitting and doing nothing isn't generally an option. So the opportunity of sitting doing nothing comes so rarely, and when it comes, I can't do it.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Heaps of it. This week happens to earlier on this week was World Suicide Prevention Day, apparently. And in the States, at least, it was National Suicide Prevention Week. I don't think it's something that's being acknowledged here. And I'm kind of very aware that, this is a discussion with a live audience. And I think without any disrespect to those of you who are here in the room and are part of this conversation, that I think the paucity of people that are willing to engage in this is sort of says an awful lot about how we pay lip service to suicide prevention and awareness and mental health awareness, but aren't actually prepared
we don't
to get up
understand
and engage in it properly.
We still don't understand it. I mean,
It's frightening.
we understand a broken bone, we understand a medical illness, and the health service deals with that with whatever way they can, but we just can't get our, excuse the pun, sort of can't get our heads around any mental health illness. And it's a lack of understanding, but it's also, we try to understand it through tangible things. That's broken, fix that. If I broke that glass in front of me, oh right, I'll either get a new one or I'll get glue and fix that one. But whenever it's something that you can't physically touch or physically put your hands on or visualize, maybe, it's like, crap, do I deal with that? How about we don't? And it tends to be, it's not all the time, because I'm seeing a growth of good ideas, for want of a better phrase. But it's the implication of those ideas that is, to me, a big problem. And it's that chasm between, yes, you have a problem, and, oh, it's too late. That's the bit that sort of myths me, and I can't get my head around,
So we're doing an event in a couple of months on comedy and mental health, and I kind of wonder how often do we sit there, and we're happy to engage in it as long as we're being entertained by it, almost like that car crash voyeuristic mentality, where it's like, okay, so let's deal with it. Let's see, you're a little bit mad, you're a little bit unhinged, you're clearly going through stuff. I'm getting a bit of schadenfreude from watching you just deteriorate in your life, but I actually don't really want to engage. Am I being too cynical?
I actually think that's a really interesting point to make, but I think it kind of reminds me a bit of Jean Sprague's friends. They're talking in the film, and the way they've obviously they're exhausted by it. I mean, this is a man with sort of chronic sort of by the sounds of it, depression, certainly deeply unsatisfied with his life, talking about suicide for years by the sounds of things, and they're exhausted. They're emotionally exhausted by it, to the point where she can't physically or mentally or emotionally manage another episode of it with him, and
becomes self-preservation.
It becomes self-preservation, and I mean, there's a lot going on with that. I think. I mean, I think you've got to acknowledge that people caring for people in crisis, or people who love people in crisis, can be completely subsumed by it. And so that what strikes me is the resources have to be there. And I think it, when that's part of the whole sort of stretching of the NHS is that I'm part of what you're saying about it's not a broken bone, we can't tangibly fix it. Well, how if you're sort of funding for cancer versus mental health, you can see. I'm not really very clear on what I'm saying. I
think it needs to come down more grassroots, though. I mean, I think what I'm finding through the search and rescue and through my knowledge, I work with ambulance service as well, is there's too much reliance on someone else to fix it.
Yeah.
And we talk about self-resilience, and it's not a suck it up and get on with it, you'll be all right in the morning sort of phrase that I'm using. It's the ability to look out for your neighbours and to look out for yourself first. I mean, we're in a fix-it nation or fix-it society, and that's worldwide. That's not just Northern Ireland. We'll fix it, but we won't look at preventing it. I mean, we talk about National Health Service and all that sort of, it's National Illness Service, really, because we don't, it's not healthy, really. But taking that aside, because the NHS is one part of it, on an individual basis, we need to have the toolkit to be able to identify our own emotions, identify our own trigger points, identify our own vulnerabilities, and help stop it before it gets to that spiraling out of control phase. Do you know what I mean? It's get away from fix it to prevent it. And it sort of sticks in my throat whenever they go, oh, it's Suicide Prevention Day or week. It's like, no, it needs to be ongoing. And I mean, when was the last time you went round to your neighbour, or your neighbours, or you chatted to someone. It's that whole sort of, let's not fix it. Let's stop it getting to that stage, you know.
Assumption that because somebody's not saying I'm not okay, they must be fine, when there's no space to say I'm not okay.
Yeah, I think so.
There's something about the Golden Gate Bridge itself that does have a sort of romance. For me, I was there because it was one of the key locations in Vertigo. In fact, it's where Madeline throws herself into the river. So I was basically going around doing a Vertigo location hunt. That's how sad I am on my holidays.
There's nothing sad about that. That's very, totally very sad. Intelligent and good way to spend your holiday in San Francisco.
And I hadn't realised at that point, I mean, that film's made at the end of the 50s. At that point, the bridge had already got this sort of romanticism and this sort of become an ideal spot for people to choose to end. And there's a theory that sort of says that people do these things in places because other people do it. So there's a lot of mimicry. So one of the things that has been cited to me, and a concern that actually the family of one of my friends had said, was that, you know, in an instance where somebody has taken their own life, there's a much higher risk of those in the near vicinity of doing the same thing. I'm kind of aware, and it's one of the risks about introducing somebody to a film like this, I think, is that we don't actually really look after the people who have gone through the experience of having lost somebody. I struggle with, I know I'm still struggling with that. I'm laying my cards on the table and saying it's really difficult some days to kind of cope with, you know, someone dying of cancer, of old age, hit by a car. I can kind of get why that happens. It's a bit crap, but, you know, accidents happen. Somebody choosing to end things, I mean, not having done enough is difficult.
One of the massive phrases in that film that sits with me, and we've talked about this within the team, is, I'll use the phrase we use, it takes some balls to go and do that. You know, and it takes a different courage. It's not a courage that society would know of as, you know, fighting off a bear or whatever, that sort of thing, but it takes a certain mindset to convince yourself that what you're going to do is a rational decision, and it's the right decision to do. And we know that people who commit suicide or try to commit suicide think they're doing the right thing for their family, and they think it's because they're a burden or a whole plethora of reasons for it. But the fallout from it and the sort of repercussions on that is a serious lack of the ability to process what that mindset, because it's like you've got a 2-year-old son.
Yes.
So when he's having a tantrum, you can't rationalize with that tantrum until it's finished, right? Because I know when I have a tantrum at my age, that no one's going to rationalize with me.
Same here,
right?
Of course, yeah.
If I don't get my sweeties or my coffee, I go off on one. You know.
If I don't get enough sleep, generally speaking, yeah.
Sleep. That's a good thing. We'll talk about that later. But you can't rationalize with irrational. And I grew up with a mother who was convinced she was a boat show.
She was a what?
A boat show, not just a boat show. So we were always told she had the flu, you know, so it was a psychiatric issue, obviously, but I never processed that as a child because it's like, that's irrational. Do you know what I mean? So I never be able to rationalize whenever she goes off in a irrational spin because someone's coming around the house or whatever. I will never be able to go and convince her that what she's saying is irrational because she's convinced it's right.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that process, and then that the people who are trying to pick up the pieces at the end try to rationalize it, and you can't. And that, to me, is the hardest thing you'll ever do, is trying to rationalize with irrational. It just doesn't work.
How do we teach that?
That's what
can we teach that? Should we even bother teaching that?
What teaching?
How to cope with the irrational?
Well, I can think of many situations in which that would be useful, but I don't know. I mean, by the time you've got to that point where you have convinced yourself that they are mistaken, that they only think that they want you around, and they will find out how much better off they will be when you're gone. And by the time you've got to that point, that's too late. I mean, you've really got to intervene. Not too late, but too late for that message really to be heard effectively. I mean, you've got to intervene when there's before that sort of suicidal ideation has progressed to the point where, you know, that conviction has taken place. I mean, I'm not saying that one cannot intervene and turn somebody back from suicide. I mean, I'm speaking from experience here. I have been turned back, clearly. But that is it feels like a very rational position, as you say, Stuart, at the time. The time to have that intervention is before that thought process has proceeded to that point, surely.
I'm just curious in having these conversations because we don't have these conversations. So I'm not saying these are, I'm not trying to get a right or wrong answer either. And, again, this is one of those rare occasions where I cannot help but look inwardly at kind of my own processes as well. And so it's just like, you're still constantly trying to kind of work your way back and kind of remodify and correct stuff and change things in your head and say, what could I have done differently? I don't know. But I think we do need to talk about it more. We need to talk more about the mental health situation, and
particularly, I mean, I'm not by any means trying to denigrate women's mental health, but we need to talk about men's mental health. I mean, men's mental health is in crisis. And we can see evidence of this constantly. I mean, the statistics are horrifying. I don't want to get into stats, sorry, but it's the leading cause of death in young men between the ages of 5 and 49. And that's just horrifying. There's obviously this is a conversation that needs to be had, that the taboo needs to be lifted. And I think films like that one are brave. And I mean, nobody wanted him to make that film.
No.
And if you sort of talk to the guy or you read what he's talked about, he had to lie to, was it the parks people in San Francisco, because he knew that they would say no. And in fact, the article that it's based on, that was in the, I think it was the New Yorker. I was going to say New Yorker, and then I doubted myself and thought it might be the New York Times. But the article in the New Yorker, the man who was writing that article, when he was writing the article, people from the parks were coming up to him and going, I really wish you wouldn't write this. I really wish you wouldn't talk about this. Knowing that it's the top spot in the world for suicide, and knowing that the resistance had been there in place since the bridge was built, putting a suicide net.
You actually can't get stats on it now. They have got to the point, because of the fear of imitation, since this film was made and released in 2006, they now don't issue stats. They
officially stopped counting when they were running in on 1,000, because they knew people were going to want to be number 1,000 jumping from the bridge.
There's over 1,600 people have done it since 1937 on the bridge.
It was within months of it opening. Yeah, within months of it opening. So, I mean, there is a romance. I've walked across the Golden Gate Bridge myself. It's spectacularally beautiful.
It's a bloody long walk.
It is a very long walk. I was not prepared for that at all. I was wearing sandals. I should have been wearing hiking boots. It's a bridge. How long is a bridge? We've walked over bridges, haven't we? Not that one. No, that's a very long bridge indeed.
And then go back the other way.
And then you've got to go back the other way as well afterwards. Like, wow, that was a long walk. Oh yes, the city's over there.
When you can see it.
When you can see it. I mean, I think that's something the film does really, really well, is it captures how spectacularly beautiful it is, as just, it's an incredible achievement of human engineering in an incredibly beautiful place. So I can see why the romance attaches to it, but it's a terrible way to go.
Oh, horrible. I can't remember.
Horrible.
Do they talk about the physics of it in the film?
Don't talk about it in the film, but they do in the article.
Yeah. It's something like something between 75 and 120 miles an hour hitting the water. Most people are... Internal
organs are shredded. Yeah. They say people tend to drown in their own blood.
But that's rational.
Yeah.
Looking irrational, it's a terrible way to go. That's a funny old cliche that you hear quite a lot whenever people say, oh, such and such, it's a terrible way to go. Like, there's a good way to go, Oh,
I think there is. I think there are some good ways.
When I'm 120 in my bed asleep at night.
My great-grandmother decided that she was ready to go, and she fell asleep that night and didn't wake up. I think that's a good way to go.
But then it's the issue here. So then we get fixated on the practicalities of it, rather than, again, this is how we kind of deal with this conversation as we get onto the issues. How do you do it? Why do we not talk about this? But what about the actual mental state that puts you in that place?
That's exactly the gap I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We're very good at talking about it after. Oh, maybe if we had done this, and it's like, then do it. Do you know what I mean? If we're at any point after someone's committed suicide, go, oh, maybe we could have done that. Then why aren't we doing it? Do you know what I mean? And that's it. I don't know. Obviously, there's no answers that I have. Anyway, I've only got my own opinions on it, but I don't know what the answer would be. You know, is it being able to identify the early stages of mental health issues, or is it being able to learn support structures, or is it being able to just identify it in yourself? I
think it would be helpful if we could talk about it openly and freely without fear of judgment, which is the big problem. I mean, I had a situation, so I'm fairly public about this. I had massive depression issues as a teenager into my 20s, and then a very bad relationship that sent me over the edge. But there was a point where I went to my GP for antidepressants. My GP refused to put it down onto my record that I was being put on antidepressants because I was depressed. Instead, he had a whole big story about how they were also quite good for back pain, which I also instantly had, but that's what was going on my record. Not I actually need some proper help, but it's just like my back's sore.
But that is a very real issue, though. I mean, I know somebody very well indeed who regrets ever having spoken to his GP about depression because he now can't get life insurance. He was ultimately able to get it, but after long battles and paying through the nose for it, because you know, the best that anybody that can work out is that he's regarded as an unacceptably high risk because he's in the highest risk age category for male suicide. And he wishes, he literally said these words to me, "I wish I'd never said anything about it."
So this is the problem then. So then you've got people who are going through this stuff, who are in these states where they could do with help and they can't talk about it. You know, you find some sort of outlet and you can't. As a society, we don't have these conversations. We certainly don't have them, frankly.
Because it's classed as something silly.
Something silly? Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't do something silly like that, would you?
No, I when I started having those seaweed shakes in the morning, I stopped feeling depressed straight away, and just go for a run and stuff like that. Yeah, no, that wasn't depression. I'm talking about things that have been said to me. You know, I started going for runs, and I
drink yak's milk and it makes me feel better.
That maybe probably wasn't sort of depression that needed to be treated with antidepressants, and that's just because, you know, I do go for runs and I'm still depressed. So, you know, simplifying it to that extent isn't helpful.
Or is that masking things and just trying to distract yourself by giving you something else to focus on for a bit rather than actually dealing with the problems that are still fundamentally eating you up from the inside?
Unhealthy coping mechanisms and all that sort of stuff.
We'll not share details of our unhealthy coping mechanisms in case it goes down our permanent record.
Yeah. It's already there, don't worry.
No, I'm well aware we've been talking an awful lot and you may or may not have something to say. Does anyone want to contribute? You don't have to. You're not under any obligation to. Deathly silence. That's okay. I wouldn't force anyone to talk.
No, he normally does go out and force people to talk, but
I think on this, not to tell anyone that.
Yes, I know, but I'm just explaining why you're being nice.
I knew you don't take notes. I knew you don't take notes. Yeah, it's terrible. I'm kind of very wary about how far to take this on a personal level tonight, and how much to deviate away from the film. Because the film for me is still a powerful piece of filmmaking. Out of curiosity, did we all appreciate the film? Yeah, okay. When you've all stayed, well, you guys have stayed. Some people couldn't take it and they've left.
Out of curiosity, anybody kind of question the motivation of the film? Because that's something that I'm struck with when I watch it. Not that questioning the motivation, more that some of the criticisms have been levelled against it. I can see where they've come from. I mean, was it in The Guardian? It wasn't The Guardian. The Guardian reviewer hated it. I mean, loathed it. I think they called it the most morally loathsome film they'd ever seen.
Would you feel like you're somehow intruding on something you shouldn't?
I definitely, I mean, I feel profoundly uncomfortable.
Is it because it's someone dying?
I think it's because I'm watching somebody in a moment that isn't designed to be public. And I don't think by no means am I sort of anti this film. I'm very, very pro this film, in fact. But I do remember reading a review of it that called it a particularly beautiful snuff film. And yeah, you know, you can't actually really deny that there is a level of, I don't want to say prurience, but there is something that feels a bit prurient about watching people in crisis die horribly.
I guess if we lingered in close up on their bodies as they hit the water, I might feel that, but we kind of don't.
We did see somebody getting fished out or starting to be fished out.
Sort of. I mean, but it was sort of. I mean, for me, it's like watching the jumpers in 9/11. You know, there's a kind of aesthetically, there's a kind of beauty to the fall and the and what sanitized impact that we see. I mean, for me, there's a distancing there. It's only when you hear the stories about the people and you kind of realize that they're in that moment that you sort of think. And Jean at the end, who sort of bridges the whole film, is particularly kind of theatrical, I guess.
I'm struck. Most of them just look vulnerable. They just look horribly, horribly vulnerable. And whatever romance they thought was going to attach to them by virtue of dying in that way, it's gone. The guy that kind of ungracefully sort of slips and falls between the ledge and the bridge itself. I mean, that really did feel horrible to watch that.
But I mean, you do say as well that it's it's a private moment, but it's a very public sphere and space in which to do. As they say, there's a little bit of dialogue for one of the tour guides. There's over 9 million people come to visit this every year. There's obviously a lot of people in that space who can see you. Stuart, you're looking very thoughtful, and I'm
trying to get my head around the whole sort of idea of should you be watching people when they're in their most vulnerable state. I mean, we spend a lot of our time within search and rescue either intervening when people are at their most vulnerable or dealing with the repercussions when they've reached that vulnerable state. And should you be watching it as a movie?
Well, they did shoot a documentary about you guys, didn't they, fairly recently?
They did. BBC.
I have to admit, I have not watched it.
It didn't show anything,
and that's obviously a choice that they've made.
But all that. I don't want to say I've become desensitized to stuff like that, but in a way, I kind of have with sort of life experiences and experiences within the team. But I think people need to understand the impact. And I think in this day and age, when people don't read and people have less imagination than they would have done maybe 10, 15 years ago, unfortunately, the only way to get the impact in your head is to visualize it. And unfortunately, that seems to be through video or through YouTube or through shock factor sort of. I mean, TV is full of it. I mean, you talk about is it okay for that documentary, and people put a lot of fire across the bow of that documentary. It's this, it's that, or whatever. But you watch the news.
Yeah.
You want to see shocking images. You watch the news. You know what I mean? It's day in, day out.
I tend to shout at the news. I'm not allowed to watch it anymore.
Well, it's that effect. It's that emotive. And in this day and age, it's less about written word and imagination and more about visual stimulation. And to become emotive,
I mean,
we need to see stuff and we need to be shocked at it.
Certainly, I mean, there's no room for complacency after watching that film. No. There's, again, I mean, I suppose that idea that it's glorious or romantic. I don't think you can watch that film and come away with that sense.
Well, I mean, for put into context, I mean, if you're told that this is about a person a week attempts to jump from the bridge, and then you know this is what we know, and this is a very, very visible place and a very somewhere that's very, very apparent. Stuart, you were telling me what the statistics were for your call-outs.
Well, last year, now this is sort of regional Northern Ireland, we had 404 call-outs. Now that's encompassing the mental health issues and the sort of illness with dementia and that sort of, but it's still, we're Europe's busiest search and rescue team, and the majority of what we do is mental health issues.
And most of that goes unseen.
Yeah, I mean,
it goes unreported.
It's only recently, it's only within the past maybe year that we've actually had a Facebook presence. Because we're different than the likes of mountain rescue and stuff like that, is the people that we go looking for don't want to be found. And we've never really been in a position to not advertise our services, but to have a Facebook or a social media presence, because the sensitive stuff we're dealing with isn't for Facebook. Now we're in a situation now where for fundraising and et cetera, we need to be in that. So we do it very sensitively. But certainly I knew before I joined the team that it was busy. I had no idea how busy until I joined the team. I mean, I definitely spend more time with CRS members than I do with my own family. And that's the reality of it. And we're 24/7, 365 days a year. You know, we get call out on Christmas morning, we get a call out New Year's Day, whatever, and that's what we do. And it's, unfortunately, and it's terrible to sit here and say it, it's not getting any less at the moment.
The fact that you as an organisation need to fundraise at all sort of says a lot about
always
the visibility.
Sticks in my throat. Always
doesn't
sticks in my throat, because we have the fire service turn out sometimes. We have, you know, all the paid statutory bodies, but yet, not that we're used and abused, but we are.
but
we're absolutely used and abused.
A service that's getting increasingly necessary, a service that 404, I mean, that's more than one a day.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, that the service is so underfunded that it now needs to fundraise.
Well, it's completely sort of self-funded. I mean, we're all volunteers, right from the top right down to the bottom.
Well, I mean, I think that just sort of shows, to a certain extent to me anyway, the invisibility. Yeah.
It's still to this. I mean, I've been with the team 3-something odd years now, and still people are going, "Oh, I never heard of you." It's like, because you won't.
I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of you guys before Robert was sort of saying that you, again, I mean, I'm just sort of struck by just how necessary an institution it is, and how desperately sad it is that it's so necessary.
But the beauty of it is, and the beauty of the way our organisation works, is we're maybe getting paid would make us cynical, because I mean, we're not as cold cut as a lot of the sort of statutory bodies are. You know, we'll return to searches time and time again until we find a result. I think the longest one we've had's been 9 months or something like that, maybe longer. But everybody who's in the team has their own individual problems, and we all know each other. And we're the wee cliche, we're a wee family, you know, and we do, and we all have our reasons for joining. We all have our good days and our bad days, and we go out with the best intention. And I think sometimes if you brought in the pay level, it might bring in that sort of level of cynicism that we witness, certainly whenever we work with other bodies, you know.
I suppose you would probably have to put a line under some of your searches and say, that's it, budget's run out, can't do that anymore.
Well, when you start paying people, you start falling under bureaucracy, and you start going, you know, oh, health and safety, you've been out for, you know, we've been out for days. I mean, one of the longest searches I've been involved in is 22 days, and that's going to work, finishing work, going searching, going to bed, going to work, finishing work, going searching for 22 straight days, you know. And any other, if you were getting paid to do it, you're like, oh, can't do that, that's not health and safety, you know. It's like, but that's we do it for the right reasons. And also,
I think what comes across very clearly is that our attitude to mental health is still very much
it's fix it, not prevent it.
Yeah, looking for something after the horse is bolted is not the time to do it. I mean, it's an important part of what needs to go on, but
yeah, definitely.
You hopefully want to try and avoid getting to that point.
Yeah,
and I can't imagine actually getting to that point even of the discoveries is something. I mean, your mental health, doing what you do cannot be in the best of places.
It affects you, certainly does. I've struggled with mental health issues in the past with certain addictions and attempts myself, but dealing with it and seeing the fallout and the upset sort of people left behind, but yet the gratefulness for whenever you do bring a body home, and they're so grateful for that closure bit or that next step. It actually keeps me grounded doing it. You know, it sort of makes, anytime I feel like sort of spiraling out of control or whatever, you go out on a call out and you just sort of go, actually, no, it's okay. I feel crap, and there's people here around me who know when I feel crap or know whenever I'm not on form, so they bring me aside and they're like, we'll talk about it. And it's genuine communication and it's genuine connections, and that's the absolute key. And that's what I've said a few times tonight, is we miss this gap between, are you okay, and oh, crap, we should have done something. And I think certainly being involved with the organisation has taught me to invest in the people beside you, that's for sure.
I suppose to take things on a slightly more positive note, anecdotally at least, from my experience, things are getting better in terms of the ability to talk about mental health and the ability to not be okay with your mental health, and the resources available. I mean, again, this is not something I talk about an awful lot, but I started showing signs of mental ill health when I was quite a young child, and there was nothing available. My mother is a very resourceful woman, and she is a very empathetic woman, and she is a very determined woman, and she could find nothing to help this 5-year-old child. She put me on zinc tablets in the end because somebody told her that might help, and there wasn't anything available back in the 1980s, and I guarantee she would have found it if it had been there, because she scarred high and low trying to help me. And if I compare that to the situation these days, children in my life that are dear to me, and I'm not going to name them or anything for their own privacy, showing signs of mental ill health has resulted in a referral very quickly to people who can help them. So the intervention is more available, but again, it requires the asking for it, I suppose, and it's we're fortunate to an extent in my family in that we have more experience than perhaps one would like of mental ill health. We know what to look for. We are on the lookout for it. So there is no need to bury it or to disguise it. And I think
is there not a risk of pigeonholing them whenever we're?
I suppose that is
at a very young age. Bang, there's
and
you're in this category and stay
absolutely
there.
Get out of that if you can.
You look at America and the chronic problems they have with things like opioids and medication, and they medicate everything rather than actually deal with it. So talking therapy, for example, is something that I think we need a lot more of.
Oh yeah.
Just bloody open your mouth and talk about whatever it is that's getting you down and stop.
Because we don't have the capacity to do it. I mean, there isn't the capacity for that, except in a therapeutic session very often in people's lives.
In the same way, I think with your workplace. I mean, it's something that you've got a lot of friends and family in that documentary. But there's not employers and the people who probably they're spending most of their times with, who are sitting there with somebody who's in crisis, not doing very much for them. I mean, we're lucky we work together a bit, so if I'm feeling down, I can say to Rachael, I'm feeling like shit today, and she'll go, give me 5 minutes, I'm just with the kid, and then I might get a text back, but we can chat. There's a system there, but when you freelance, it's very different. If you're working with someone in that capacity, it's different from being in a big company where they have HR departments and everything else, and they're maybe kind of oblivious to what's going on, or they're not oblivious, but they just don't have the capacity.
Or there's a stigma attached to it. I cannot tell you how many places I've worked where somebody has had a period of depression that's required them to be absent from work, and the bitching that goes on behind their back about that.
Really?
I wish I could get some time off for feeling sad. It enrages me.
I see, that's something I've never thought about, and I went off long-term sick at one point with mental health problems. I have no idea what they said about me. To be honest, I don't want to think about it. I think they didn't say anything.
It's just being silly.
Yeah, it's the stigma. And we haven't got rid of that. I think part of it is the lack of understanding of what mental ill health actually is. When it doesn't look like very demonstrative mental ill health, like paranoid schizophrenia, that woman, and then I think there is a complete lack of understanding sometimes. Somebody that hasn't experienced it, hasn't seen it happen, or hasn't known that they've seen it happen, there seems to be a real lack of ability to empathize with the fact that it is a debilitating illness. And some people can work with it, other people can't.
I think we're going to wrap this up. I'll let you have any final thoughts, either on the film or on the appalling state of our mental health.
The appalling state of our mental. Let's not finish it on a negative point, because there is a lot of good goes on. And
go on, sir, give me a good thing.
There's finally a suicide net underneath the Golden Gate Bridge.
There is not a complete suicide net.
It's in the process.
It's in the process.
Yes, but
it's
they
been
done
decades of arguing it, though.
Decades of arguing, but they've done it. Like, you think of the amount of lives that's going to save. just even by making it a little bit more difficult
Oh yeah.
to end your life there are people that are going to be turned off that, and if they are still in crisis, they might be prompted to reach out, or they might be prompted to try a method that it can be rescued from.
It's a very good thing. I mean, I still have flashbacks to walking across that bridge and seeing over the edge, because it's quite scary, and the little man in his little golf buggy with the police stopping to make sure I was okay as I'm walking across. It's like, yeah, fine, thanks. No, I feel really self-conscious, like I need to keep moving. So yes, that is good. Yes, Stuart, you have that lovely smile on your face, like you've got a really nice thing to say.
No, I just, what can I leave this on? I mean, it's the positives that I see a lot more good, especially around Belfast, than I do bad, if that makes sense. I mean, we do a patrol on a Friday and Saturday, and I see a lot of good people, a lot of vulnerable people, but a lot of people who are open for you to come and have a chat to them if you sit down beside them and bring yourself on their level, So I think overall, it's down to individuals just to step outside their comfort zone and speak to people, and not be scared of just taking 5 minutes out of your life and spending it with someone else, complete strangers or not. It doesn't matter.
Quite like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything positive to say or not. Not that I want to sit and wallow in negativity at all.
You're wearing red crushed velvet. What's not positive about that, for goodness sake?
Our listeners can't see it.
But you're fabulous.
Ish.
I think the positive for me is, look, we are having a conversation, and at CinePunked we feel very strongly about facilitating these kind of conversations. I know that people will tune into our podcast and they'll download and they'll listen to it, and hopefully they'll have conversations as well. And to reassure people who are listening, there is information on our website if you need referral for any kind of support, or if you can't find the information, just drop us a line and we'll point you in the right direction. We're trying to assist with that.
And it's absolutely worth making the call as well.
Yeah.
If you are in a bad place, it is absolutely worth making the call. It can feel like an absolutely insurmountable obstacle, but there are people at the other end of the line who are ready to help you.
Yeah, it does make a difference. I've been there. It helps. It's something we feel is important, and we want to carry on having these conversations. And if you're interested in having more of these conversations with us, just get in touch. Thank you, those of you who came and for offering to help. Hopefully there's some benefit out of that. Thanks to Rachael for watching yet another one of my suggestions.
It's a good suggestion. They're generally good suggestions. I've only hated one of the things you made me watch so far. But I think we argued the case that it was quite good. And Stuart, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. No worries. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'll happily have you back at some point to talk more about this, because I think
if I come back.
Yeah, you come back. You're not allowed to leave. Yeah, absolutely fascinating, and kind of a really useful insight into what goes on for someone who's on the front line of the work. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's us. You'll find out more about us on our website. We're at www.cinepunked.com. You'll also get us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and
all those nasty social media stuff.
Yeah, where we kind of engage with you all in a very positive way. So download our podcast from the website, etc., and hopefully we'll see you again. And thanks so much to the Crescent for facilitating this special event, and the staff here for helping out. You are much appreciated. So love to you all. Big hugs all round. Pat your friends on the back. And we'll see you again. Thank you. I'll just layer that applause up a couple of times, make it sound like we had a full house.